if you're banding fertilizer, where you position that core. And the reason we like to band fertilizer for phosphate particularly, which doesn't move, when we have plants up to this stage, they have a high demand for phosphate. So we want to get it where the roots are. You take one core in that band for every 15 in the non-band area. That gives you the average for the topsoil, which in this case was 40 parts per million. If you don't know where the band is, you can still sample, do a better job of sampling if you know the direction of the bands. And the strategy there is to take, for every core that you take another one half the band distance from it. So if it's the 30-inch rows, or 30-inch between bands, every time you take a core, take another one 15 inches away from it. And that gives you a better composite answer, a composite sample to use for making the recommendations. You want to look at probably the phosphorus. Bicarbonate extractable phosphorus was 14. So you go to, in that handout, table 3 is all the phosphorus recommendations. If it's alfalfa, we have price ratio based recommendations for alfalfa, and what that does is it adjusts for it. It's more profitable when the cost of fertilizer is low in relation to the value of the crop. It's more profitable to put more on at that time. So if you figure out the price ratio based on the cost of the fertilizer and the value of the crop, in the example it's 22 cents kilogram hay, and then go to the column, then you get the P205 recommendation, which would be, in that case, 20 kilograms per hectare, 39 kilograms of MAP, say 40. If this was going into corn, you'd want, because it's low in potassium, you'd want to place some of the potash in the starter and then the rest of it broadcast.
I'm Adam Hayes, the soil management specialist for field crops. I work out of the Ridgetown OMAFRA office. I'm going to talk to you, do a very brief soil health discussion today. When we talk about soil health, we generally talk about 3 components. We talk about chemical component, physical, and a biological component. The chemical component is what Nicole and Bonnie were just talking about, having adequate nutrient levels in your soil and having your soil in the right pH range for the crops that you're growing. So it's pretty straightforward. We have the soil tests to do the measurements for that. For the physical part of it, that's more looking at sort of the physical part of the soil, which is soil structure, aggregate stability, soil compaction, those types of things. Water holding capacity are some of the physical things that we look at. So when we talk about aggregate stability, that is basically when you have a granule of soil and we subject it to rainfall or an artificial simulation of rainfall in the lab, how well do those aggregates stay together when they get wet or get rained on. I did what we call a slaking test here earlier. This is, I took a granule of soil, which you can still see there, put it in, and then I dunked it in the water about 20 times or so just to see what would happen with it. And it pretty much stayed intact. This was taken from the soil from the fence rows, so you would expect it to have really good aggregate stability. This third one, if you look, you can see that there's really nothing left in there. You can see that all that soil is down in the bottom of it, so it means that that soil had really poor aggregate stability. So what does that mean for your field? Well, if there's an intensive rainstorm on that field and there's water running off, those will break down quickly and that soil will move off. It also means it's more likely to crust, so if you have a pounding rain, it's just going to fall apart and seal over, which also has implications for water movement in water and air movement into the soil. So, and having good aggregate stability also helps resist compaction. When those aggregates sort of hold together, they give you a bit of spring back from a load that's applied to the soil. If you have good soil structure, it's a lot easier for the roots to get through the soil, air and water to move into the soil for good crop growth. We detect whether there's compaction in the field. There's a couple tools that can be used. There's a penetrometer with the gauge on it, or there's just a good old tile probe that you can use as well. With the tile probe, it's just pushing it down, and you're using the pressure, a constant pressure, and feel the resistance. You can see it went down easy, and then there was kind of a hard layer, and then it went down on through. So as you're doing that, when you first hit that hard layer, you can pull it back out and get an idea of where it starts, and then push it down again and pull it out and see where it ends, just to get an idea of where it is. We want to try, from a soil life perspective, we want to feed that soil life. So having the residues in the surface or on the soil surface for those large earthworms to bring in. There's earthworms that run through the top soil area, and then ones that are a bit lower to that work more horizontally. They'll feed on the roots and other organic matter in the soil, manures, cover crops. Having living roots in the soil as long as possible by adding cover crops really helps improve the soil life.